ways. Certainly 2020, though, was a very productive year when it comes to e-file Texas and the work of JCIT. So we'd like to begin this morning with some comments from Terry Derrick about 2020. Terry?
Great. Thanks, Bob. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, doing a little screen movement. Let me share my screen and make sure you can see the right window. Bear with me just a moment. All right. And can you confirm that you can see?
Yep, you're good. We can see the status update slide.
Perfect. Okay. All right, great. Well, thanks everyone, and appreciate the moment of pause while I got situated. Happy to be here. Happy to see everyone's faces this morning, and hope everybody's got a good start to the new year. In terms of speaking about the performance of the e-file Texas program last year, it had some changes, as did we all with the unique year that we had. But it actually filled a need in being able to continue the operations of the court and being able to continue electronic filing throughout the state, as well as document access despite the coronavirus pandemic. And as we looked at our user counts, they picked up about 90,000 from where they were the year prior, ending up at about 425,000 registered users on the system. In addition to that, we did see about 690,000 additional filings in terms of filing growth last year compared to the 460,000 increase that we saw year on year prior. And that translated to about 100,000 new filings we saw per month, which, obviously, as you see that increase coming in, it didn't seem like a lot, but we'll talk a little bit about, why that is because of the pandemic situation. But I do think that user count and filing count growth year on year was contributed to the criminal mandate that we had saw just prior. And so as we go in and look at the filings at a deeper level, I do want to just bring out the new cases and the impact that the coronavirus had and the pandemic had on e-filing across the state. And so as you look into the number of cases that were filed, we did see a brief reduction right as the coronavirus pandemic picked up in the month of March. And the green line here that is on the screen, that really illustrates the average number of cases that we saw, or the normal run rate that we had of new cases being filed per month leading up into that pandemic time period. So you see in April, we saw a deep reduction, dropping it down from about 43,000 to about 31,000 new cases. And then it slowly began to pick back up until it fully recovered in the month of July. Just for some comparison numbers here, in January, we were about 2,017 new cases per day that were being filed. And in March, for comparison, in April in comparison, it's about 1,400, so 1,436. And when we got to August, it got back up to that 2,000 number threshold, so 2,062 in August, and then in September, where we saw the highest number of cases filed, it was 2,145. Some of the cases that we saw in terms of the trends of the case types that saw the reduction or the decline were primarily in tax delinquency cases, debt in contract cases, which is an interesting factor as we dig into that. And it'll be interesting to see the shift into this year and how those numbers look as we progress throughout the year. But the recovery and getting back on track is a good sign, even though we had the social distancing rules in place and even some of the challenges associated with that. The system and the operations of the court continue to stay in flight, which is a great thing. That means that the systems are working as they are intended in order to keep operations up and running in a remote electronic realm. We look at the redaction utilization that we saw in the state, it followed a similar pattern. And you can see in the months of March and April, a reduction, but then quickly picking back up and then regaining back to its full operational utilization back in the month of July. Solution's been used over 350,000 times, and it's averaging about 14,000 utilizations per month. Still, 3 EFSPs have implemented that service, although we hope to expand that out to more EFSPs here in the year 2021. A next area that I think is worthy to look at is in regards to our clerk response rates. And this really illustrates how fast the clerks turn those filings around with regards to a 24-hour period. So being able to submit a filing and then within the 24-hour period, being able to act on it, whether it's accepted or returned for correction. And what we see is that the clerks are continuing to review those filings in a timely manner. And so that really speaks to their ability to continue their operations despite the situation that we had in 2020. We did dip a little bit in the month of December, and it resulted in about 89% of those filings were accepted or acted upon within that 24-hour period, although the average across the year was at 92%. So we've seen now a transition as more and more courts come on board and being it less impactful as those new courts come on board and become acclimated with the criminal mandate and seeing that transition. Just kind of a frame of reference, back in 2017, we were operating at about 1.5 percentage points lower than what we're operating in the year 2020, meaning the clerks are still responding at a faster rate. And so they're continuing to review those filings and turn them back at the rates that we would expect, which is commensurate with those rates that we see and observe across the country.
Terry, a quick question on that. For the 92.02%, does that include time over the weekend? Because we know that people file 24/7, and so if they file 10 p.m. on a Friday, that may not show up in the clerk's office till Monday morning, which is more than the 24 hours. Does this number take that into account?
It does. It removes the 24-hour element over the course of weekends and holidays. This is just really for business work days. So filed on Sunday would be back into play, assuming that they would accept it or act on it on Monday. But then those that are filed on Friday are removed from the equation because of the Saturday and Sunday weekend element.
Okay. Thank you, Terry.
Sure. The other really kind of barometer that we use or metric that we use to gauge performance is around return for correction rates. So this is the amount of time that the clerks will return filings back to have them corrected. And what we've observed in the year 2020 was that it was operating at about 6% or below 6% pretty consistently throughout the year. What you see on the screen here is the last 6 months of the year. And this is really a good signal for us because the national average is about 2 percentage points higher, meaning at 8%, they return 8% of the filings coming in back for correction. The fact that we're at 6% means that we're operating in a more efficient way here in the state of Texas than we see across the country. I think that's a testament to both filers and clerks alike being comfortable with the e-filing process and becoming more acclimated to how to submit filings the right way and being able to get them in the door so that the courts can continue those operations. Next, I'd like to give just an update on our Justice of the Peace implementation. We've started this. It is in a permissive realm, so we don't see the adoption as we would see in a mandatory state. Although what we're seeing and observing here with the justice courts is pretty typical when you have a permissive e-filing environment. So right now we're standing at 145 precincts across 33 counties that are live. We do have 12 active engagements, meaning that are currently in implementation and will be going live in the near future. And then we've got 4 additional engagements that are pending, which means that they've reached out to us, but we haven't yet assigned a project team to get engaged and establish that initial kickoff meeting to initiate that project. Taking a deeper dive or a deeper look into those 12 active engagements and then the 4 pending, as well as the filing volume across the state, we see a steady, consistent set of filing volumes, but in December, an uptick. So we're averaging about 82,000 filings per month. And you can see the remaining courts that we've got currently in active engagements, with a few large ones like Dallas, JP's, Hayes, and McLennan. Even Bear is involved. And as we start to bring on some of those larger justice courts, we would expect that filing volume to increase. We do have 4 engagements that I mentioned earlier that are on the roadmap and that should fall into that active engagement category here in the near future.
Can I ask a question real fast with regard to that?
Sure.
Does that indicate that in those counties where you have active engagements, not all the JPs are necessarily involved in the system?
That's right. And we try hard to get all of the precincts on board, but it doesn't always happen. And in some instances, we only have certain precincts in those counties that are live. It's ultimately up to the precinct as to whether or not they'd like to participate in that. But once we receive a request to initiate that implementation, we do our best to try to reach out to those other precincts and see if they would like to participate as well. And sometimes we get positive responses and sometimes not.
The non-positive responses, what was their major concern for not joining in?
You know, I don't know for certain. We can engage, with my project team to know what those reasons are. It could have been just not the right timing, could have been pandemic or other initiatives that could have taken priority, or even just a recent swap in terms of the JP at that location. It could be a wide range, but I do think it varies amongst precincts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Terry, this is John Warren. If I can, as it relates to the JPs that Judge Quinn asked about, I know specifically that in Dallas, you're either an eager adapter or you are a constant resistor, and that's pretty much how it flows. But Judge Jones in Precinct 4, he's a new JP. And he's been wanting since he took office to get away from paper. He's known me. He's visited my office. I would add that Judge Jones is he's implementing e-filing in the absence of a case management system, and he basically modeled the practice that I had in my criminal courts, where we're basically using the document management system, our mainframe, and then the e-filing as the source document for the images. So
Great. That's great. Thanks for that, John. Good to hear from you.
I have a comment I'd like to make too, just because I don't see us on here. It's Ralph Swearingen from Tarrant County.
Okay.
No, we've been in the e-file world for years. In fact, we even mandated e-filing beginning in June of 2019. So everything we do here is paperless, and everything we do here is mandatory e-file, just so you'll know.
Great. That's good to know. We hope you operate as an example for others to follow. That would be really good. Getting additional precincts and volume running through the court, trying to transition to an electronic way of operating the court, I think is beneficial, especially in times like we're in now. So that's great. Thank you for that.
This is Judge Ridgway, Harris County. Since COVID-19, we've gone the Tarrant County route, or at least Judge Swearingen's route, with everything being done electronically. Trying to get this turned off. And right now we're at I'm going to say somewhere north of 80%. Pre-COVID-19, we were over 90 or 80% of all cases on the civil side being filed electronically, and so we're very successful. Judge Swearingen's model for a guide and file, and I think that's also yours, Tyler, is looks like a pretty darn good program. We have not yet implemented it in Harris County, only because of some of the struggles that we've talked about in the past, and that was the user friendliness of the application. And from what I understand, that application is getting better and better with time.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, we actually just completed our refactoring of that system using a different technology and making it more efficient. It's now built on an Angular platform, which allows for us to scale at a lot faster rate. And it also produces a faster rendering on the screen to provide a better user experience. So that'll be something that we'll be introducing here shortly. But yeah, thank you for that. That's great to hear.
One of the concerns I have, Harris County has a court manager's office, and the court manager's office tries to be allow us to be consistent across all 16 JP courts, and so all 16 courts are participating. And I know in the study that I did for this group that we were looking at the large population counties, and I see on your list Bear County, but I don't see any precincts mentioned, and they were one of the largest counties not participating. And I see Dallas County precinct 4-1, but it's not all of the county. And I think part of that happens because there's no central management, if you will, of the systems across the whole county.
That's a good point. Yeah, the decentralized judiciary, I think, can be even more prominent in those larger counties with that have several precincts. I know in some of the smaller ones, it's maybe one precinct, so it's a little bit easier of a conversation. But when you add a large number of precincts, then it becomes a coordination effort, and having some assistance like that with an administrative body that can help with that definitely helps kind of ensure that we're all aligned, moving in the right direction.
Sounds good.
All right, transition. I'll pivot just a bit to research and give you an update on research. We're averaging about 400 new users per week. If you look back just 2 years ago, we've grown pretty consistently in the user counts. It just jumped 450% year on year from 19 to 20. 67% increase last year, but that really accounts to the 22 or so thousand new users that we had. A large portion of that, I think, is with regards to registered users, so people that are needing access to documents and court records online, and as well as attorneys. You can see that that is illustrated in the chart there with the purple and the green designators for each of those stakeholder groups. Interesting to see that we're starting to see a larger increase in user adoption and looking for specific records, primarily out of those counties that are integrated. It does provide a more of a comprehensive offering for those court records, inclusive of judgments and orders, which I know often come from the court. That integration includes those records, and we see that that's one of the primary drivers for users of the system in terms of which court records they go and try to obtain. In terms of the integration, I'll speak just briefly on that, and this will be the last slide before opening it up for any questions that may be present. We do have 21 counties that are live with an integration with their case management system. Those 21 counties are large counties in terms of population sizes and make up 30% of the state's population. We're still working on a couple of additional counties with Gregg, Webb, and Wood, which also make up another 1.5% of the population. So that'll get us at about 32% of the population once those are locked in. And then we do have two notable commitments on integration with regards to Travis County and Bear County, which will add another 11%. So getting closer to that 50% threshold, which is a good thing. Continue to hear the feedback from those users of the system with regards to judgments and orders. Those continue to be the #1 request for those users. And of course, the integration with the case management system addresses that challenge. So that's been one of the recommendations from that user community, is to try to get those judgments and orders in the system to have a comprehensive record that they could access.
Terry?
Yes.
Where are we on integration in Bear and Travis in terms of moving forward? from them?
Yeah, I think, in Bear, I think they're in the middle of a case management implementation, and I think it'll coincide with that. I think Travis is working through a few final pieces, but I think that they're working towards that. I don't have an exact date, but I can definitely pull back some of that information and give us more of a timeline on when we would see those come on board.
And Terry,
Right,
my
great.
question is for these 21 that are live with the research, are these all Tyler Odyssey counties, or are there any that are not Tyler Odyssey?
No, they are Tyler Odyssey counties, Casey. It's the relationships that we have with the clerks, it allows for I guess an easier transition, if you will, just because we have those relationships. We know the clerks and work with them pretty frequently, so it assists there. We would open it up to any other clerks that want to integrate. I think it's a great thing, regardless of the case management system that they use, just to get that uniform, comprehensive record out there for those stakeholders that are choosing to look for them.
So based on your experience, do you feel that that's something with the API? Do you think it's with the clerks? I mean, I know the other thing, I know that research is used in other states. So I guess my biggest question is, has any case management system integrated with research, just so that I'm comfortable knowing that it's nothing wrong with the APIs?
Yes, absolutely. In Illinois, we work with several different case management systems that are all integrated. It's mandated there, so they've all worked with us and gotten their systems up and running. It's difficult to say what I think the real reason is that we haven't moved further here. It could be that we're observing something that's similar to e-filing, whereas you see just a smaller adoption in a permissive state versus a mandatory state. That could be the case. It's difficult to know because I think it could vary depending on each of the counties and the clerks there.
And just to touch on something that I thought I heard you say, that you said that Illinois was mandatory on research, and so they've got other CMS providers working with it.
That's correct. Yeah, they mandated both the e-filing integration as well as research integration.
And then my other question with integration is, this means that if a county, and I'm looking at the map, so I'm going to take Collin County, for instance. So because they're integrated, that does mean that their judgments and orders are available through research, correct?
That's right. It allows for them to put in some of those records that may be generated by the court or may circumvent the e-filing process, such as SRL filings over the counter. Those are now going to be put into the system with that integration, because the case management system feeds that data to the system. The other thing is, it's not really necessary the documents are present, as it is the metadata that allows for the users of that system to know that that document exists and that they can acquire it. The security of that, it's managed at the CMS level, so they manage the document and what documents and data should go out to the case management system. So it does give the clerks a greater sense of control over those records.
And I should put an emphasis on that last point, which I think is really important for everybody on this committee to remember, which is in non-integrated, and Terry, correct me if I'm wrong on this, in non-integrated counties, the Research Texas documents are those which are being stored in Research Texas, so that the clerks don't have direct control over that, at least as quickly. They still could go in there and do stuff, but it requires a manual effort, versus those that are in integrated counties, it's basically whatever is live at that moment in their case management system. So if they seal a document at this moment, it is not available in the next moment to anyone searching in Research Texas, which is not the case if they are not integrated. Is that accurate?
That's right, David. The non-integrated courts, the documents are present in the system, and in order to make any changes to those documents, such as secure them or remove them, the clerk would have to go into the research system and make those edits, in addition to the edits that they would be making or those changes inside of their case management system. Through an integration with the case management system, when those changes are made in the case management system, it communicates that information to research, and then research behaves accordingly. So if it's a document that was available to the public, but then becomes sealed or secured through perhaps a court order, then that change that's then made to that document in the case management system is then reflected inside of research pretty much right afterwards. It's a great question. So
we'll open
Casey,
it
that
up.
was mine.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, we'll open it up for any other questions for Terry on e-filing.
I have a request with regard to the first slide talking about the number of the filings over the last year and how they dropped and how they rose. Could I get a copy of that slide? That was the subject of a discussion in a recent Chief Justice meeting, and I'd like to show them that there's data supporting what was discussed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chief?
Be happy to share.
Yeah, Chief, I'll be happy to share that slide deck with you.
Thank you.
I've got a question, and that is, for all these filings that we do have, e-filings, are we able to break them down by case type?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So for instance, debt collections versus evictions versus small claims versus other administrative filings.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, if there's a specific set of data that we want to see, we can certainly break it out. You know, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice the data. You know, you can do it by case types and even by filing types, but then you can break it down by office or jurisdiction as well. So if there's something specific that, you know, we need to see, that's something that we can definitely pull for you. The hope is that is something that we provide the supervisor users of the system to be able to obtain that data in real time and on demand, and have a tool that they can do that with and be able to get that data at their discretion.
Terry, this is John Warren. I'm not quite sure if that's information that everybody's aware of. I mean, the ability to run those types of reports. Is there something that you can send out? I know I would like some individuals in my office to be able to do that as well.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of ways right now that it's being done. Right now, there's daily reports that are generated and then provided. There's also if you want to call it a reporting center that you can access data. I think we were in the process of rolling that out. Keith, I can't remember where we left on that, but it's daily reports that you can go and obtain that information for the jurisdictions that you oversee. And then we're working on something else will take us a little longer to get there, but ultimately would give the authorized users, the supervisory users for those jurisdictions, a more granular look at that data as more of a dashboard view with drill down capabilities. So I'll be happy to share with you what we have today, and then maybe we can talk about where we're headed in a future session.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any word on the new EFM to get out of Silverlight?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's really kind of a two-pronged question. I should say the question has two different facets of it. One is on the filing portal. And so Tyler had two e-filing portals, two EFSPs prior to 2019. And one of those was in Silverlight. The other one was in HTML5. And both of them were kind of not architected in the way that we wanted. So we've redesigned our filing portal and have that implemented now. I don't know if we've done any marketing to try to move over to that, but the new filing portal will be rolling out. I mean, it's available now, but it will be rolling out here in a more aggressive way this year ahead of that Silverlight deprecation event on October 12th. That's for the filing community. We'll work with the OCA to remove pick a date in which we would remove those old filing portals and provide a long runway and adequate time for those filers to make that transition if they choose to use Tyler's portal. Of course, the other commercial EFSPs are still available and they can use those as they do today. From the clerk's perspective, we are still working through the new review tool. It is set to be generally available, I believe, at the beginning of June. So we'll have between June and October to make that transition. And so we'll be working closely with the OCA on that rollout strategy to ensure that we're proactively educating and training and providing a testing platform for the clerks to use ahead of that transition. Great question.
Terry, we can't upgrade a lot of our equipment and go to new browsers until the Silverlight is gone away. So the sooner the better for us to be able to transition to Edge and other browsers that we need to go to.
Terry, Miles Brissett, I wanted to thank your office for helping us with the new portal. We've been testing it, trying to use it, and the first user experiences were not where we want them to be, but your staff got on a call for about 4 or 5 hours with our staff and was able to work through what we're seeing as a practitioner trying to file motions into the system. So thank you. I know they're working on it. They talk on a weekly basis.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're hoping for, is getting that real-time feedback and being able to make those adjustments and improve the system to get it where it needs to be. So thank you very much for partnering with us on that. Appreciate it.
So Terry, what's Tyler's experience with SolarWinds?
Our experience with SolarWinds.
Are you using SolarWinds in Tyler Technologies anywhere?
Yes, we are a user of SolarWinds. We are they are one of many throughout our larger organization that Tyler does use. They have our hosting in some of our applications has used SolarWinds, but that's also it's I should say it's one of many that we do use.
So what have y'all? What's your remediation effort? I assume y'all done the search for indicators of compromise, and you've done your endpoint searches for any of the executables. Have y'all made progress on that? It's the problem I've got too. It's not unique to you.
Sure. Yeah, we have done some analysis on that. All of the analysis that we've done has proven to be in the successful realm of what you would expect. I don't know how detailed I can get into it, but we didn't find anything that was of concern on our system through those efforts.
What I was hoping I would hear is that y'all found no indicators of compromise. What the security people call an IOC.
Correct. Yeah, we haven't identified anything that is of concern through those efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Terry? All right, well, thank you as usual, Terry. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, eFile Texas 2. Casey, are you going to do that, or is David?
I'll let David if he wants to, but I'm happy to do it.
Go ahead, Casey.
Okay, sure. So eFile Texas 2, as you all know, we since December of 2019 started the procurement process.
18.
Basically, was it 18?
Yes.
Oh, good gravy. Boy, how time flies. To go through the procurement process to grab a new EFM, mainly because our current contract with Tyler runs out at the end of, I believe it's August of 2022. And so OCA embarked on that effort, as David said, December 2018. We did a request for offer and went through that process. And then OCA completed that process about 2 weeks ago. And OCA selected Tyler Technologies to continue running the e-filing program through at least August of 2027. What that means for JCIT or for you all is that, well, first off, I'd like to thank you all that were on our subject matter committees and our evaluation committee, because we picked several people from JCIT amongst other places for that. So thank you guys for those of you that participated in that. Moving forward, we're putting together our governance group, which again has several of you as members on it. And that is to help us govern as we move to eFile 2. And so generally what that is, and this is an extremely high level overview of it, is that we're looking to do a multi-jump upgrade in the EFM. And so some of the things that Tyler has planned out for us between now and the time this is moving ahead, obviously, Tracy mentioned moving away from the Silverlight EFM. That will be going on. The biggest chunks, if you will, and again, this is high level, we'll be adding more configuration utilities for the clerks so that they can do things on their own without having to call Tyler support. And I think it's things like setting up local holidays. And so it allows for more granular control at the local level, which currently requires Tyler support. Terry mentioned a little bit about their advanced reporting tool. They'll be using, I believe, Socrata, which they bought recently, to be able to do the real-time e-filing statistics. And Terry, jump in if I'm saying anything wrong, but my understanding is that will give you that real-time experience to be able to see this is what's going on with e-filing. Another big change that will be happening is that we're required to be using texas.gov for payment processing. And so eFile 2 will move us away from Chase Payment Tech back onto texas.gov. So that will definitely be a heavy lift. And then another heavy, go ahead, Tracy.
So have they improved their payment processor since we dealt with them in e-filing 1.0?
Or at e-filing -1?
-1, right, yeah, sure.
I really hope so.
Okay, so you don't know for sure.
We don't know yet, know for sure. We do know that the company that is doing the payment processing today is different than the company that was doing payment processing at e-filing -1. So we're hopeful that they've improved, and I expect that we'll be engaging with them early on with Tyler to see exactly what's going on. And so hopefully within another month or two, we'll have a decent read to tell you that, yeah, we think it's better, or no, get ready for the ride.
Did all state entities have to move to texas.gov? Because like Tracy, I just recall issues with that payment engine.
Yeah. So
in statute to every week.
Yeah, in statute, there is statute that says that agencies are required to use texas.gov for payment processing or to get a waiver. When they enabled that, when they created that statute, we were already on eFile Texas and Chase Payment Tech and away from texas.gov. And so we've been getting waivers on eFile 1 so that we can continue to use Chase Payment Tech. And DIR's indicated that they would not be doing that for eFile 2. So yes, statute for that. And then finally, the other big heavy lift for both our CMS side and our EFSP partners is we'll be migrating from ECF 4.01 to ECF 5. And so I believe that will create some API changes, but will make things more efficient in the transactions between the EFM, the CMSs, and the EFSPs as well. And then finally, the other thing that this entails, which this will be doing as well, is add the movement of the EFM. Right now, Terry, I believe you guys are hosting it in a co-located data center up in Dallas and probably another one up in Maine. But they'll be moving the platform out into the AWS Gov Cloud as well. Terry, did I get that right?
You did, yeah. That's our goal, is to transition our solutions into a government cloud hosted solution with AWS. Part of that is with the builds of our new tools, both on the filer side and the clerk review side. We've been operating that in a form of more of a monolithic structure, which has led us into the inability to innovate and bring new functionality to the community at a pace that we would all like. Separating those out into independent solutions and some of the benefits that are associated with the virtually unlimited infrastructure that a government cloud agency like GovCloud and AWS provides does give us the ability to then innovate faster by changing up the way that we conduct our processes. We can essentially stand up a second set of servers with the new software version and slowly begin introducing those while removing off the other. So we're no longer taking the site down, updating those servers, and then reintroducing them back to the realm. We can do that in real time, which means that the deployment activities will be more of a continuous improvement model as opposed to an ongoing event. The other thing too is that it will, because we are separating out those responsibilities between solutions, we'll have the ability to then update portions of the application without impacting other stakeholders, meaning we can update the review tool without impacting the filing community, and we can update our filing tool without impacting the review community. So it should provide us some efficiencies moving forward that will be welcome.
So to reiterate what Terry just said, because that was with microsites, it can be very techno mumbo jumbo. But what that means is that currently today, when we do updates to the EFM, there's notification that goes out to the CMS folks and the EFSPs, but it may not have, those changes may not have anything to do with the part of the EFM that they interact with. It may be a change to the clerk review queue. And so with eFile 2, those will all be split up so that we'll continue to go through the process we do with the CMS folks and the EFSPs to give them time to make sure that things are up to date by the time that update hits. But then this will allow Tyler to respond quicker to clerk concerns on the clerk review tool, just because it's not as tightly coupled into the EFM as it is today. So again, with eFile 2, we'll be bringing you status reports as we move through that. And like I said, we've got a good governance committee that will be meeting here very shortly, or kicking off shortly, and then meeting to confirm, here are the changes and here are the buckets and the project timeline that we can do as we run this through. Just so that you guys are aware too, Sam Lavario, also with OCA, is going to end up being the project manager on the eFile 2 implementation piece. And so you may be seeing emails from him as well for the various kinds of things that OCA needs help on determining what needs to be done in certain cases, just so that we have good feedback. Any questions? All right, hearing none, seeing none.
Casey, you want to go on with the case management system update?
Sure. So the next item on the agenda is the update on the Uniform Case Management System, or at OCA we call it UCMS. You all may recall that in OCA's last in this current biennium in the budget, the legislature asked OCA to identify a uniform case management system for the more rural counties. These are counties under 20,000. OCA embarked on the RFO for that. And this was back in 2020, early 2020. Maybe that was the December 2019 one. No, I think it would have been December 2019, very early 2020. We recently got that RFO put out on the street back at about mid-November. And so the responses to that RFO are due next week. And then we'll have an evaluation committee come together and make decisions on which vendors that we would choose for that uniform case management system. The plan right now is that system is optional for counties, so that it's not mandatory that a county pick it, but we're hopeful that we get some vendors in place that will provide options that are attractive to those rural counties. One of the great things about this is I can tell you in the requirements posted in the RFO, it makes it so that any vendor that's awarded must be integrated. So We ask all those responding, tell us how you're going to integrate with eFile Texas, tell us how you're going to integrate with research. So again, that we can continue to move counties towards integration. The other thing that we know that it can do, or that we've required that it do, is integrate with DPS so that they can do, daily batches rather than have clerks keying stuff in on a website, which is also good. So again, hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have an update for you again on where we stand with UCMS and what, if any, assistance that OCA is going to continue to need from JCIT on it. Any questions?
This is John Warren. I do have a question. As it relates to those rural counties, we're basically giving them a case management system, but who's going to be there to do the implementation?
So right now we've got the vendors asking, where part of the RFO is tell us how you would implement that. Give us your training plan. Tell us how you plan to do all that. So that is included in the implementation of it's included.
All right. Any other questions for Casey?
Just add one thing here, and Casey may have said this and I may have missed it. So just so you know, the RFO does contemplate that there may be multiple vendors awarded. I believe it's up to 3. Is that
3?
Up to 3 vendors could be awarded. So just so you all that's actually in the RFO.
Yeah. So
as it relates to David's statement, so how many counties do we have that this would possibly impact? Is it the majority of the state?
So the target population are counties under 20,000 in population, which is 130 counties. So they would have a choice. I mean, any county in the state could use it if they decide that that's what they want to do. But the target population, according to the legislative appropriation, were counties under 20,000, of which there are 130.
Wow, that's a lot.
So hopefully, as David said, the goal is the choice of up to 3, so that we can give counties a good choice, and that at the end of the day, if a county chose it, you're right, John. The pro is that it's paid for by the state, not by the county. And then you get full integration into eFile research and to DPS, so that all that information is flowing in an efficient manner between the counties.
So a county of 70,000 could opt to use the system if they wanted to get out from under their maintenance contract by their current platform?
Sure.
Correct.
And you're saying 3 different CMS systems could be awarded?
Yes.
Up to 3.
Up to 3.
Up to 3, okay.
All right, one last question. So who becomes desktop support for these counties if they're having issues with their case management system?
So again, in the RFO, we contemplate having the vendor to tell us what is your support plan for this.
Okay.
Because we would put that back on the vendor.
Okay.
What's the upside of having 3 as opposed to just 1?
So the biggest upside that we see, and David, jump in if I'm wrong, is that it's the competition, and to give a choice to the counties, so that they're not locked into one particular vendor, because it may be that they have a vendor preference locally, and so we want to be able to provide choice.
Yeah, I think Casey hits it. We think the number 1, competition is good. Number 2, the clerks have said all along when we've been doing this that they would like some choice. In fact, when we were talking about this funding, there was a request from them to consider specifically having multiple vendors. And so when we were looking at that, we thought that'd be good. Plus, as you probably know, various case management systems have various different functionality. We obviously have 3 of the requirements set a base level of functionality that every one of them have to provide. But my guess is that vendors will propose varying levels of functionality, and that way it gives the clerks a little choice as to what best meets their needs. So we're hopeful that we'll have enough bids from successful vendors that, and I will just say there's been a great deal of interest. We posted on the state website where all the RFO information is, the number of participants in our our bidders, is it called bidders conference? Whatever it's called, bidders conference. I believe there were around 60 folks who participated in that, representing multiple companies. So anyway, it seems to be a lot of interest out there, and I think that's a very positive thing.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
My question's probably a much bigger one. I know there was funding for the counties with less than 20,000, and congratulations. I did the math on that. That represents about 2.6 million people at most, and which is less than 10% of the population. Yet, out of these 16 largest counties, or of the 33 that are participating based on Terry's numbers, we have another 16 counties with a population of at least 80 or less than, I'm sorry, greater than 80,000. Is there any consideration toward working on targeting those counties that have some population but are not participating or not funded in this program?
So I believe, and David can jump in if I'm wrong, that the goal is to, once we award up to 3 vendors, we'll start working with those counties that are under 20,000 to see which of them want to participate. And let's say, we throw out the net to 130 and less than that want to participate, and then there's funding left over. I believe at that point, then we would start exploring changing that number from 20,000 to increase it to make it available to other larger counties as well. If you read through the base requirements on the RFO, it's definitely geared toward those rural counties and geared toward that level of volume. So I think the general thought was as you grow to the Harris County side, or the Harris County size of things, that this CMS may not have all the power and the punch that you may want.
I'm not concerned about Harris County. I'm concerned about those 16 counties that aren't participating. They have a population of at least 80,000, and that population is going to be somewhere around, I think around 30% of the state's population. So it's somewhere between 6 and 8 million people.
Yeah. Like I said, I think as we progress through the project, if funding's available, we'll be able to expand that out. And at the same time, if it's a great success and we see a lot of benefit with it, I'm sure the legislature is going to the legislature definitely wants to know through the quality assurance team the success of the project. And so that may be something that we can look at expanding once we see that this is successful.
Rooting for its success.
Us too.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
I believe so.
Okay. Justice Simmons, I see you there. Are you back?
I am back, but please, Bob, go ahead.
All right. Cybersecurity. Who's gonna take that?
Dennis.
I'll start out, and then I'll hand off to Casey if we have any questions that I can't get to that are of a process question. So our committee was formed last year. We met a few times to discuss how we can best recommend to the Supreme Court that they increase the security or improve the security posture of our courts. The first challenge we had was trying to find out where everybody is. We have so many different counties and jurisdictions that have courts. They're all over the place. Just to illustrate the challenge, I'm sure y'all probably seen headlines about SolarWinds. I asked a question earlier of Tyler about SolarWinds. SolarWinds is the largest challenge IT professionals have ever had when it comes to information security. This company is used by every major company in the world. They are used because they were relatively inexpensive, and any organization that's interested in maintaining the reliability of their network has to have some component monitoring system. That's exactly what SolarWinds based in Austin did. They provided monitoring. My organization used SolarWinds to do that very thing. SolarWinds was a trusted vendor. As a trusted vendor, like Microsoft, like Apple products, like Google products, we trusted that they had protected their software. And so anytime we installed a piece of SolarWinds, every software came with a certificate saying, I guarantee this came from us and we're trusted. So every organization that ran SolarWinds, and that's almost every large company in the world, most governments, a lot of schools, they ran trusted software that had software that was written by Russian hackers. The software is now running on computers all over the world. And we still don't know everything about how it got into SolarWinds, but for a while there, we were getting updates daily telling us what to look for. Okay, now look for this. Okay, now search for this and put this protection in place. Now uninstall this and put this patch on. From the same company who had been telling us to trust us, and for over 15 months had been giving us software laced with Russian hacker code. This is the biggest breach that the world has ever seen. Nothing like this has ever happened before. For us to advise people on what to do, we have to know where their current state is. Organizations that have a large security process also have plans to identify what's unusual, to search for unusual activity, and to roll back those changes to a prior version. If you don't have a standard that allows you to roll back to a prior version, then when someone tells you you need to get rid of this and anything that's happened since then, you have no point in time where you can go back to and put everything back. So before we recommend to the Supreme Court what we should ask people to do, we have to ask each one of these courts, what are you doing for security? We believe most of them, at least the large ones, are covered on an umbrella security policy put in place by their county commissioner's court. Someone in the commissioner's court is appointed to be responsible for the information security program, and they're the ones handling the standards and telling each one of their departments what they need to do to protect themselves. We suppose. To that end, we put together a survey that asks questions like, who's responsible for information security? What has your experience been in security awareness? Do you regularly conduct phishing tests? We have some simple questions on that form. We've got input from everybody. John participated. He gave us some great questions. Dan gave us some great ideas about how not to piss off any court commissioners when we put the survey out. Those were great ideas. And the hope is that we're going to compile this and send it out to each of the court clerks just to get an idea where they are. Because with such a broad spectrum of security, we can't really make recommendations until we know what would be effective. Our premise is that large counties, those counties with 1 million or more, probably already have some security policies, procedures, and officers in charge of making sure that security is being applied. And this is important. If the person who's in charge of security can't make another department follow security rules, why would the department follow those rules? They won't. And that's one of the challenges you have. Someone has to be responsible. They have to be able to do these searches, and they have to report back to the authoritative body. This is what I found. Here's what I need you to help us put rules in place to help manage it. So our first step is to put out that survey. We also have talked about which standards we should adopt. There are probably 3 or 4 standards in the world that we can use that people would create their security policies toward. But like I said, without knowing what their current standards are, it's hard to adopt. Should we, for example, adopt a NIST, National Institute Standard of Technology, a NIST standard, or should we adopt an SOC standard or an ISO standard? We don't know which ones would work best. My organization has a security standard. It is 158 pages long, and it covers everything. I don't expect hardly any county to have a security standard that's as involved or detailed, but maybe a few of them do. And the reason why you have to have those standards is someone needs to have that document that goes back and says, you're not following procedure. Everyone in your group has the same privileged account. You need to redesign your system so that the privileged access is reserved only for a few rare occurrences, and everyone who uses the system routinely doesn't have extraordinary privilege. And I'll tell you why that's important. Extraordinary privilege means that person who clicks on that link or runs a piece of software that's already infected will now spread that software everywhere that privilege allows them to. That's why it's important to use what a security professional call least privilege access. Everyone should use the least privilege they need to run the system. So that's kind of the direction we're going. Our hope is to get that survey out, compile the responses, and kind of group our courts into areas that will allow us to create 2 or 3 different sets of recommendations for each group. We're never going to be able to create a customized rule that applies to everyone. We need a more generic process, and that's why we're trying to do this. It's a tough challenge in this state, and one that I'm sure a lot of courts will push back on because, again, it's easiest to say, you know what, Judge, you just have access to everything, but that is not least privilege. That allows that judge now, who may get an ad for a really cool new hunting lease, to fall prey instantly and suddenly have infected dozens of systems rather than containing the damage to 1 or 2 places.
I have a question. In discussions on this topic, has there been any attempt to include the end users, being the attorneys, in terms of education or some set of recommendations, since that's probably one of the lowest levels of use?
So that's our hope, is to promulgate that kind of training out. But the first step is to recommend something that the Supreme Court can ask the courts to do. Part of that will be, these are the guidelines you're going to have to ask. For example, some of our counties already reject or return PDFs that may contain dangerous or potentially damaging attachments or embedded text. Sounds like a reasonable process. We want to find a way to encourage ways of protecting that. Then there will be an education program for the users of the systems, like the attorneys or other people of the system. But the first step, we think, is to get to those courts and figure out, what have you already done? Where are you in this process? You're muted, Casey.
So, Mark, let me ask a rebuttal question to your question. Is that the level that you're expecting, or are you thinking more like very basic, rudimentary computer security skills that you and I, as members of the general public, should know and love and practice?
I think of these as overlapping concentric circle bubbles, and both are needed. There's a huge difference in level of proficiency among attorneys, as there is among clerks, and by clerks I mean the ones that are on the front line, and so yes, and I think it may not be the responsibility of this group or this committee or what have you, but if we're only dealing with courts and ignoring the people that are shuffling the stuff up to the courts, it seems like we're kind of putting one half a blinder on to what the actual problem might be. And so so I thought, well, if you're gonna two bird, one stone might be a way to, or with an eye on, hey, look, this is our end game. Can we do what's the most we can do and not the least? And I'm not saying in any way that we're doing the least, but there's a huge problem, and it trickles all the way down. And it goes to very basic functions. And so I assume that there's virus scans when things are uploaded and that sort of stuff. But the problems are massive the farther down the food chain you go.
Well, and one thing I think that we could do, and this kind of dovetails into what Dennis and the cybersecurity group can work on, is I'll circle around with the state bar, because I know their IT director, to see what, if any, kind of training programs that they have, or that they're working with the different sections to instill that culture of security, so that we can educate people down. Because you're right. I mean, I've gotten at least 2 calls from my mother-in-law this week asking if something's legitimate, which is great. But I know that because she's of an older age, that's who they're preying on. But, you know, kudos for my wife in teaching her that when Microsoft calls your computer has not been broken into, you need to hang up and call us, and then we can tell you that it's illegitimate. So I think just even some of that basic stuff is a good thing to keep everybody on their toes with.
If it's desired, you know, I can ask. We have a tech section meeting come up soon. I can ask and probably have 1 or 2 people appointed that are into that type of stuff. If there could be some communication or subgroups or working groups, or you want participation from other sectors, because that could drive.
Well, what I can tell you is that the bar is the right way to go when it comes to attorney education. The Texas bar is not quite as strict as the other jurisdictions where my firm practices. Attorneys in California, New York, and Washington, D.C., where we have offices, are all required to maintain information security proficiencies, and they become accountable and responsible for privacy issues as well as good document and compute hygiene. Texas hasn't gone quite that far, and that may be where we want to say is, hey, what are other bars doing, and what can we do to improve the posture of our attorneys?
Dennis, you know, are you thinking about, you know, some of the things like statutory dealing with the feds, with HIPAA, with financial services and things like that? I know a lot of firms had to upgrade their security, as did the lawyers, in order to comply, to be able to basically service their clients. And so I agree with you, it's hit or miss. I mean, although the bar may not require it, just statutes and things that lawyers work with do require some firms and some lawyers to really upgrade their security.
Well, let me give you an example of where I think the statutes are a little weak today. There is no law or rule or requirement that I know of that says that an attorney must A, have a strong password to unlock his computing device where client records are stored, and there is no requirement that he not share that password. These are some of the oldest, most basic information security practices, but in Texas, I don't think it's a requirement.
It's not, but except the firms, Dennis, I would tell you, any firm that deals with big banking and stuff, they absolutely, because I've had friends who are all mad because they have to have these long passwords, they have to change them all the time. No client stuff goes over the, you know, over Zoom or whatever out the door. So at least for some firms, and I only cite them as maybe a resource of attorneys who could help us spread the word. I mean, that are used to it or something.
That's correct. If you do work for any hospital or any financial organization, whether you're a law firm or whether you make Kleenex boxes, you're going to be audited. I get audited close to 70 times a year by the clients of my law firm. We're required to comply with their information security standard, which is not 158 pages, it's 990 pages, and includes rules that my lawyers don't like, but we have to adjust. And some of those rules are things like you're not allowed to use a USB drive ever. You have my client's data or my data on your attorney's computer, you can't plug in a flash drive. If you have my client's data, you can't put that file on Dropbox or Box.com or wherever else. They're rules that they then ask my IT group to enforce. They're hard, and you're exactly right, Judge. They do not like it when I show up with new rules. I am the first man that the knives get thrown at.
And by the same token, those rules would not be feasible for 60% of the bar.
You're right.
not even close.
You're right. They wouldn't.
Things like two-factor authentication perhaps might be, but there is a tech component to the lawyer rules now, at comment 8 that says technology is a part of the definition of competence, but then it's up to everybody to how to implement it, how to interpret it, et cetera, et cetera. So it just as part of the conversation, I think we're getting off a little bit, but as part of the conversation, if we're going to drive standards, if you will, if we're going to talk about security for the courts, maybe we can include a trickle down to the other sectors, spaces that use the stuff that we're talking about.
I think it's fair to ask the Supreme Court to adopt a standard that says that if you're practicing here, you probably should follow some rules. But I think those rules are promulgated through the bar other ways. But there may be legislative or statutory issues that address them. I will say, I believe in probably half of the counties of the state, it's common practice for attorneys to have no password on their computing device. Turn it on, you press a key, and the screen comes up, and you start typing. And that's not because they're lax. They've just never seen a reason. I'm in this office by myself. Who's going to break in and steal my files? But it means that if you're infected by that message from Microsoft that your Windows is hacked, now when you're away from your computer, they can take anything they want from your computer. It may not be interesting to steal the files that someone claims that they were treated unfairly by their landlord, but there may be other more interesting pieces of information in there, like wiring instructions, bank account numbers. And I can't tell you the number of times that clients have called us saying, oh my God, someone just sent us instructions to do this deal closing with wiring instructions to a bank in Hong Kong. Why did we get that? It didn't come from us. Someone's email was read, and someone on the other side of the world created an email that looked just like one that came from my lawyers, but it did not. And it includes wiring instructions for $30 million. This is not a one-time instance. This is happening today, almost every day in this state. And law firms have to be diligent, but our clients have to be also, as well as the citizens. Every little piece of information is going to be harvested. They're going to use it any way they can.
Things
Whether
that
they're getting $500 from your bank account or 500 million, that's what they're looking for. I'm sorry, Tracy.
and things that I'm worried about on the clerk side, and kind of things that Mark was bringing up, was the fact that, if that malware or whatever is in the attorney system that was not secure and got compromised, then any documents they file with the court, I know Tyler or probably the EFSPs run through some virus checking sort of things on the documents, but things do potentially get through if their virus software is not up to date, and then it lands in our systems, and then it's in Research Texas, and those are the sort of things that we don't want.
Right. And to add to that, it doesn't matter if your virus scanner is up to date or not. I mean, I know with the ransomware that hit OCA, our virus scanner was completely up to date. It was a new variant that hadn't been caught in the scanners yet. And so it's the same kind of thing with when Dennis was talking about the SolarWinds attack. Everybody's virus scanners are up to date. This was something brand new that wasn't spotted until FireEye saw traffic going through that looked odd to them. And it was just happenstance that someone saw that and started digging into it.
Just luck. If FireEye hadn't been hit, nobody would know about it today. But Casey, you bring up a good point. That's why these security standards are so lengthy. The assumption behind the security standard is you are breached. Now, how do you contain the damage? This is where least privilege comes in. Just assume you're going to get hit. Something's going to get in. Someone's going to fall prey. How do you contain the damage and keep it as small as possible?
Right.
And those are the things that really irritate the users, because it involves not having permission to do something without getting permission to apply, having rotating passwords, locking your screen, turning off your machine. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm on the the National Association of Counties IT Standing Committee. We had a meeting Monday. One of the topics of discussion that's going to be one of the things that they addressed in 2021 because of all of the hacking and security breach. One of the things that they will be recommending once they've formalized the process is recommending that all government agencies go to the .gov platform versus just like Dallas County's on .org. So that's something, while we may be addressing cybersecurity and all these on the other end, there's going to be other requirements coming from other areas, like the migration to .gov versus any other platform that we may be on.
And that's a very good reason. And part of it is that if you're consistent, your users who get email will at least recognize when something's a little weird.
Yeah.
And that's something I have to constantly be aware of. If I'm advising my users to send an email so I can fix their notebook computer, I've laid the groundwork for someone in the future to do the same thing and pretend to be me. If you send it's and you ordinarily have a .com, but you're a government agency, you've just conditioned people to look for any domain rather than .gov.
Yeah.
It's a layered approach. There is no way to make it completely sealed. You just want to have what they call defense in depth, as many layers as you can, and that's what it is frustrating to many users.
Yeah.
But
Dennis, among the things that we could do to get started and give courts and clerks and court administrators some guidance, do you think it'd be feasible to create a set of questions that folks should be asking, either of themselves or the people that are providing their IT service?
yes, and that's exactly what we hope the result out of this survey will tell us. What questions do you ask? If we ask those same questions, for example, of Tracy, she's probably got an information security manager somewhere in that county who already reports to the commissioner's court, who already is telling on her if she does something that violates the rules. But that may not be the case in Jefferson County. So we don't want to ask the same question of Tracy if we know she's got a practitioner who is already accountable for the information security in their county. If, for example, another county doesn't have that officer, then we would ask those other questions a little more lengthy. Do you do fish tests? What's your failure rate? How often do you do fish tests? Do you try to harvest user credentials? Those are questions that might be a little insulting of a county that's already doing that, but we don't want to waste anybody's time. But you're right. We have that the questions.
Dennis, I want to call out Miles because I saw him turn his camera on. Miles, tell us from the defense attorney side some of the things that you see and hear.
So from my days as a prosecutor, we implemented the CJIS security standards from the FBI because John Warren and I think the county attorney from Austin is on here, Travis County's on here. We all had to fight with this and grapple how we were going to deal with data at rest from the FBI. So if you possess TCIC, NCIC rap sheets, your data at rest when it leaves your office as defined by the FBI has to be encrypted.
Yep.
I left the DA's office at the end of 2014 and went into private practice with Judge Gill. And we've developed, Higginbotham's our insurance carrier. And if you look at the malpractice and the insurance to operate a business, Higginbotham hasn't set its CJIS, but has adopted basically the same standards. So Dennis, we still can use thumb drives, but if we leave our office, they have to be encrypted or our insurance carrier doesn't protect us if something bad happens. So they've worked that in. You look at the regular defense bar, they use AOL, Yahoo, Gmail accounts. Big civil firms that have copiers set up in their firms to where Gmail is the default scan email for the copiers. That's the way the copy guy installed them. I've done some consulting since I left the office, and it's scary as to what's out there. SOX 1 and SOX 2 and even SOX 3, even if you ask those questions of small practice attorneys that don't understand what the accounting world has done, that's where we mirrored a lot of our practice. I don't have as big a paper as Dennis does, but that's what we base our stuff on. Can we protect it? The basic Dropbox, if you have the free Dropbox, which I guarantee you anybody here that's got a bar card has used it at some point, the free Dropbox doesn't comply with SOX. You have to pay to get the security protection with Dropbox. They don't give it on the free account. So it's scary to see what's out there and to see what data is floating around. And if you want, I teach a cybersecurity class at UTA, and class starts on Monday.
Great.
Let me add something. Historically, is remember, we're talking about the judiciary here primarily and the clerks, but when you get to the county level, IT is usually an IT department for the entire county. So there's a lot of cross there. So you can protect the judiciary, but still your opening will be, coming from the treasurer's office, maybe. And so, as a lawyer that represented, individual county officials for so long, one of the problems, and I was guilty of this in the early days as well, is that we're independently county constitutional officials. And there's just something innately that bothers you when you come in and you're told by an IT department that doesn't respond to you, it responds to the commissioner's court saying, no, you can't have access to something in your own office. And so that was, I'm talking about it over a decade ago. And I was one of those saying, wait a minute, I'm, in charge of my office. I should have access to everything in my office. But then I matured to the idea when you started seeing these hostage situations, these ransom situations going through, I wasn't going to be responsible for the whole county going down for a weakness in my office. And so I, got with the program and I started accepting a lot of these security measures. But I think the answer is the law is not real clear, especially in county government, that the cybersecurity issues have to have one master, one person that's responsible for an edict and saying you will comply with these standards. Right now, a commissioner's court can only say, well, you want to use our computers, you want our support, you pretty much have to agree to do this and follow these rules. So it's a tug of war. And the law is not really part of it. It's just like who can win in a leverage game. But I think there needs to be law to make it clear that because of the risk involved, the county officials have to cede their authority in some matters to someone else that's got IT and cybersecurity as primary concern.
Well, and I'll say
familiar,
that.
Casey?
Say it again.
Does that sound familiar, Casey?
Of course it does. It's the same argument that we have all the time. I will say that last session, the legislature did pass statute that now requires that anybody working for government, doesn't matter if it's local, county, state, doesn't matter, they're now required to take 1 hour of cybersecurity training a year, and it's the syllabus for it is prescribed. And so OCA does it for state employees, but I've already been in touch with Chelsea in Harris County, who's their CISO, because there's a cross with the appellate courts that there are judges that are county employees and state employees at the same time. So we've got to argue about whose cybersecurity training that they take so that we don't unduly tick off judges by making them do it twice. But I think those are the kinds of things, and part of me wonders is, cybersecurity at the state level, my manual is about 150 pages long. But I agree, I don't think there is a manual for the county level, nor is there one for the local level. And I know David Escamilla said, and he's right, at the larger counties and even to the mid-size, there's a county IT department that is dealing with the courts, sheriff's office, commissioner's court, anybody and everybody that has any kind of county business. And so that means that courts are but a slice of the bigger pie. But we know too in the rural areas that not even that exists. So county IT is whoever is the best one at touching computers. And that's it. I do think, back to Dennis's point, I do think there are things that we can do, or at least standards that we can advise court users on, to where they can at least isolate themselves. Going back to what Dennis said about realizing that at some point you're going to get hit. Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get hit. And so then it becomes what can you do to minimize the damage? And even with being part of county IT, there are things that people can do to minimize the damage even within their own offices outside of what some of the IT folks are doing. So I think there are things that we can do and promulgate that will help and assist.
I have to say, this is gonna expand and expand and expand, because with COVID-19 and a lot of us working remotely, and so that requires us to do more security. I know Dallas County has implemented these little token devices. So when you get rid of the VPN, you have to use your little token device in order to gain access to the system. And so, as it relates to more virtual work, so it's going to require expanding your cybersecurity requirements and activities as well.
Yes.
Casey, it's Miles. If you were to ask most small practices, they wouldn't be able to tell you what their threat board is. But we've had 897 threats in the first 14 days to one of our websites that controls our main email. So we get a daily update in the dashboard and can see stuff and work on it through Exchange and everything else. So that's the scary part of this, that why are they picking on us? Just because we defend cops that shoot people? I don't know.
You may not being singled out. That's not uncommon for a popular website to get hit thousands of times a day.
Yep. I would say from what we see in the judiciary, or at least the state-supported OCA, about 80 to 85% on any given day, 80 to 85% of the email gets dropped at the front door with virus attachments and all sorts of crap in them that I don't want any of my users to even see in their inbox.
But the scary part, if you were to ask Tyler what most email addresses are for those registered to file in Texas, then
it's probably Gmail.
It's probably Gmail.
Probably Gmail.
That's the scary part.
And anyone can get a Gmail address, no matter where they are in Eastern Europe. It's free.
With no identity verification whatsoever.
No verification at all. In fact,
I've got to tell Miles, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. It's also possible that it will say it's from Gmail, but it's not. It may be from a computer that's been hacked in Oklahoma, being controlled by some guy in Czechoslovakia. There's no way to know.
Dennis, I have a question for you, and possibly based on some of the comments that Miles was making. I think to a degree, a lot of the hacking they look for emails or platforms that has a lot of traffic and appear to be a safe and trusting email address. So I think that's what lures people in versus something that would be automatically suspicious.
Absolutely, and that's the common technique. I described some scenarios before where people are looking for information. Just because you don't have important information in your home address at Gmail or AOL or Outlook.com doesn't mean it's not a target. These guys are looking for it, because if you've got a job, at some point, if you're careless, you're going to get an email sent to that address that contains information that is valuable. That's what they're looking for. They want that valuable information that they can use to either monetize or expand into access into another system where they can monetize that.
And to add to Dennis's point, speaking of monetization, one of the other things that we see is now they're even pivoting over to identifying what those high value targets are. So, I'm sure I could go to the Harris County website and find out Judge Ridgway is a JP judge. And wouldn't it be great if I figured out a way to hack into his email account and start sending out targeted emails out to people in Harris County and his district saying, hey, you have a traffic ticket. I need you to pay $100. Send it to this PayPal address and just harvest that kind of money. And so what we're seeing is a lot of, and we do this at OCA to where obviously we know who our judges are. And so those accounts get that extra precaution to know that, hey, people are starting to identify the people that have power, so that it's much more valuable and easier to monetize, a Judge Ridgway account than it would be to monetize my account where I'm not a judge. So we need to just make sure that everybody's aware of that kind of avenue as well, that they are figuring out what it is that people do and garnering the natural power with those positions to try and leverage those relationships.
Social media.
Exactly.
I will share as a last note, one of the things that I do in my firm, we have 1,400 users of computers, and our rule is a pretty lengthy minimum password. It's got complexity rules. We require them to use that. We haven't gone to bio sensors because we don't trust them yet for all situations, and we have to be able to trust them for all situations. Some of our attorneys work on mobile devices that aren't their original computer, so we have to find a way to trust them. But we do monthly phishing tests, and at least 4 times during the year, we're going to test our users in a way that tries to trick them into giving up their user credentials. If they give up their user credentials, they have to reset their password and they have to sit through that 1-hour training again. It's the only way we can be sure that they're not giving up their credentials, because we know they're getting phished every day. It's happening all the time. So I'm sad to say our last test in December, 2 people gave up credentials and they had to go through the process.
So is there any, in moving this kind of, which has been a fascinating, very productive discussion, but in just asking you a question of, so Dennis, for your committee, I know you're doing your survey to find out kind of where every current state, right? That's what basically you're trying to do. And we've had some good suggestions about, we've got to educate lawyers, got to educate judges and clerks. What else can this committee do, you think, Dennis, to support you, if anything, right now, between now and our next meeting?
What I think we're wanting to do, our end goal is to recommend to the Supreme Court that they require every court to have some adopted security standard, which includes categories for security awareness, minimum standards for protecting their information, and rules for verifying, and this is important, their third parties. SolarWinds have taught us, even if you've got a third party, you have to ask them questions. How do you protect yourself? If you're trusting, for example, a company to be your managed service provider, we learned early in, was it 2019 or 2020? Years are blending together. Some number of counties were hit because their MSP was the one that got hit by ransomware and erased everything. And I think it was 6 counties. So you have to ask your service provider, what do you do? It's not enough to ask your own employees if you trusted someone who's not being trustworthy.
So Dennis, should we just, okay, so here's some thoughts I have, is that we're going to wait, of course, for your next report, because that'll be interesting to see if you've gotten some of your surveys back, what information you're getting back, and that sort of thing. But I'm also wondering if for a future meeting, maybe part of our meeting time be spent just with a succinct presentation on what lawyers, clerks, and individuals, some basic things that we could all do. Now, this would be preaching to the choir for you, Dennis, but it might be, would this be useful to anybody else on this call, just to know kind of what we're talking about and what are some of the basic things that we think we would be asking lawyers, judges, clerks to kind of do?
I think if nothing else, it would help run in parallel with what Dennis was indicating would be the ultimate goal anyway. If we're going to make recommendations to the court, it'd be helpful to have this information so we have some degree of consistent parity.
Right. And you can see what kind of pushback, Dennis, you're going to get when our group starts going, oh, no, that is just way too hard, man. Changing these passwords every month, I'll never remember anything. And then I just have to write them down. Right. And so, you know, it'll be interesting to see kind of where you're headed and just get the general, you know, uninformed views of these things.
Justice Simmons, I agree with you. I actually see Dennis as a doctor who practices internal medicine, and so he's doing a presentation to all of us, and we all have some type of an ailment, that being our weaknesses in security. And so I think that's kind of like what it should be, because you talk about things at different levels, and of course everybody have different beliefs and everybody have different practices. And so I see a session where Dennis is talking to us about maintaining our, in this instance, our our cybersecurity health and the things that we can, the exercises that we could do so that we can stay healthy.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's think about that in terms of let's get our own have a presentation where we can kind of understand what are these issues we're even talking about, and then it'll be nice to know kind of where you are. So, Dennis, maybe if your committee could of course, next meeting, give us an update on where you are, how the survey's going and everything. But number two, if you all would think about what kind of presentation, and it's got to be kind of basic to this group so that we can better understand, the issues we're discussing.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
We'll come up with that. I don't know if I can shoehorn in 30 minutes, but I'll see what we can put into as small a compact program as possible.
Well, it could be an hour depending on what else we have on our agenda. So I can check with you and Casey and everyone over the course of the time to see who's reporting and what we've got to report.
Perfect.
So
I think the Dennis's presentation, that whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, that can be kind of like the Cliff Notes version, and then there's the full a report or a present or PD or PowerPoint presentation that may be available for people to actually just go through at their own leisure.
oh, good idea, because I bet I actually do speak on this, and so I actually do have a paper and a PowerPoint and everything else, and I'm going to send those to you, Dennis, because they're just really basic. They're for general practitioners. But I'll send you that, and you can lift whatever you want from it, however you desire. And the issues change so rapidly.
Really do.
What's going on? It's outdated now, even though it's like a year old. So. And I'm sure other people may have some materials too. So Bob, where are we next on
We have one more report, and that is from our orders.
And so I'll give that one because we failed to get that committee up and rolling yet. So what we'll be doing over the next month is working with, and I believe it's Justice Simmons, Todd, and Carlos are we decided they were the chairs.
They're chairs, co-chairs, yeah.
And then so I'll get with them and we'll get those meetings set up and rolling. Hearing from Terry today, it's nice to hear that those who choose to integrate have orders in, and it's nice to know that with UCMS coming down, that if a county elects for that, then they'll be integrated, thereby having orders and judgment available on research as well. So that may be a path forward to think about as well for the committee.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have any new business they'd like to bring up before the group?
So does the group, you know what, Bob, we probably should ask them, let's ask the group, our next meeting will be later in spring. Do people prefer, or do you want to do Zoom, or are you ready to get back together if that's feasible? We don't know if it is or not, but I would like to know kind of what people's preferences are, if they have a decided preference one way or the other.
No actual preference. Someday I would love to be able to get back in person, but I think given the situation, it's just got to be monitored. And so Zoom for me is acceptable.
Okay.
I think as Travis County is still spiking, I think the county judge's rules about groups, we would exceed the current regulations. The question is going to be, what are the regulations going to be, at that time?
Right. I think then we probably, to be on the safe side, and so everybody knows about travel plans and everything else, I think our next meeting will probably be by Zoom. And Casey, remind me when we scheduled that. Is that?
I believe we set the date, and you and Bob had
April 29th.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we set it on. So that was the other thing. We did set it on a Thursday on April 29th. And so I know there was question. We had someone say that Fridays were always bad. So just asking the group, is everybody okay with Thursdays?
I think we did Zoom.
Yeah, especially if it's Zoom.
That's good.
It's Zoom cyber secure.
Yes.
Never mind.
I can tell you the Zoom channel that we're on is not traversing through Chinese servers.
The good news is there's already a little thing flashing in the upper left-hand corner of your Zoom screen saying that Casey's already broadcasting this out to the
Live.
world over YouTube. So privacy is beyond the, it's
Right.
not an issue. Doesn't matter what Zoom's doing with it because we're handing it away for free.
Okay, well, I look forward then to our next meeting and learning more. Everybody with those Hotmail accounts with like your date, the year you graduated. I don't know how many lawyers clearly you're using a high school Hotmail account. I think we all need to move on from that account. That'll be our goal for next meeting. We'll dump our Hotmail high school accounts.
AOL will be next.
Exactly. And maybe by Yahoo that has 42,000 emails in it. Maybe I should really move on from that.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time and your efforts on behalf of JCIT.
All right, bye guys.
We stand
Thanks,
adjourned.
guys.
Take care.
Great committee.
We're
Thank you.
adjourned.